He met my family one day, and just days later, he was trying to meet another woman. He called his affairs moments of weakness. But how do you call something weakness when it is so carefully planned? My name is Emma. I am 32 years old, and until a few months ago, I believed that I had found the person I would spend the rest of my life with. His name is Jack. He was 36, confident, calm, and full of charm that could silence an entire room. When we met, it felt as if the world had suddenly slowed down just to let us exist in that single moment. I did not fall in love quickly. I am careful with my heart, but with Jack, everything felt effortless. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. I still remember how he looked that night. White shirt, rolled up sleeves, the kind of quiet smile that seemed to promise safety. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it felt as if every word had weight. I had been single for 2 years, healing from a past relationship that had left me anxious and guarded. Jack made me believe that people like him could still exist, honest, grounded, loyal. Or so I thought. In the beginning, he made everything easy. He texted good morning before I opened my eyes. He called every night before I slept. He remembered the smallest things, how I took my coffee, what song I hummed while cooking, the story about my mother's garden. He said, "You make everything peaceful, Emma." I wanted to believe him. I did. Our relationship lasted 1 year. The first 6 months were perfect, or at least they seemed that way. We spent weekends at his apartment, cooking together, watching movies, planning trips that we never took. He introduced me to his friends as his person. He told his mother about me. He spoke about marriage casually, like it was something that would just happen one day. I never imagined that behind all those gestures there could be something dark, something deliberate. The first signs were small. I remember one evening in March, we were supposed to have dinner at my place. He texted me an hour before saying he had to work late. I believed him without question. But later that night when I called, his tone was distant. I heard laughter in the background, feminine, soft, not the kind that came from a work meeting. I asked, "Who is there?" He said, "Just some colleagues. Nothing serious." I wanted to trust him, so I did. Weeks passed. The distance between us started to grow, though he kept pretending everything was fine. He became more secretive with his phone. He started facing the screen down, something he never did before. He said his battery died more often. He stopped calling at night, saying he was too tired. It was as if he had built a quiet wall between us brick by brick, and I could not find my way through it. I remember one Sunday morning when I woke up next to him. He was scrolling through his phone, smiling faintly. I asked what he was looking at. He turned the screen away and said, "Just a meme." That smile stayed with me for days. It was not a meme smile. It was something else. Still, I blamed myself. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I had become paranoid because of my past. Jack was patient when I expressed my doubts. He would hold my hand and say, "Emma, I am not that kind of man. I would never hurt you like that." His voice sounded sincere. I believed him every single time. But lies, when repeated with enough calmness, begin to sound like truth. By the 10th month, the change was undeniable. He canceled plans last minute. He stopped posting photos of us. His affection became mechanical, like a routine he performed to keep me quiet. I began to feel invisible. He said he loved me, but his actions had stopped saying the same thing. One night I could not sleep. Something inside me would not rest. I opened my phone and scrolled through social media, trying to distract myself. That was when I saw a photo of him, tagged by someone I did not know. Her name was Emily. The picture was not intimate, but his hand rested on her shoulder in a way that felt too familiar. My chest tightened. I stared at that photo for minutes, convincing myself that there must be an explanation. The next day, I asked him about her. He laughed and said, "She is just a client." He said it so naturally that I almost felt foolish for asking. I apologized, though I did not know why. That is what manipulation does. It makes you doubt your own senses. For a while, I tried to forget. I convinced myself that trust meant not checking his phone, not questioning his late nights, not noticing the new cologne he wore. I told myself love meant giving space. Then one evening, everything changed. I was in my apartment when I received a message request on Instagram. It was from Emily. I hesitated before opening it. My hands were shaking. Her first line said, "I think you deserve to know the truth about Jack." My vision blurred for a second. My body went cold. I clicked on the message, and a series of screenshots appeared. Texts, photos, hotel bookings, voice notes. Every single one was a knife, each blade sharper than the last. I could not breathe. There were messages where he called her baby. There were plans they made while I waited for him at home. There was even a photo of the same shirt he wore on our anniversary night. The date matched perfectly. While I waited for him to arrive with flowers, he was with her. I felt the world fall silent. My body trembled, and I could not tell if it was anger or grief. It was both. It was everything at once. I called him that night. He answered casually, unaware that I knew. I asked, "Who is Emily?" There was a pause, a long, empty pause that said more than any confession ever could. Finally, he said, "You are overreacting. She is just a friend." I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I sat on the floor with my phone in my hands, staring at the proof of everything I had refused to see for months. It was not an accident. It was a choice. A repeated, deliberate choice. I thought about every promise he had made, every word that now felt like poison. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I do not remember sleeping. I remember only the feeling of something breaking inside me, something that would never heal the same way again. And that was the night I stopped believing in his version of love. I did not sleep that night. My body was exhausted, yet my mind refused to rest. I kept replaying every memory with Jack, every conversation that once made me feel safe. The messages from Emily were still open on my phone. I stared at them until the words blurred into one another. It felt like drowning in slow motion, like being pulled beneath a tide that would never let go. When morning came, sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it did not feel like light. It felt intrusive, harsh, as if it was trying to expose everything I had ignored. I walked to the kitchen, made coffee out of habit, and stared at the cup until it turned cold. My heart was still beating, but everything inside me felt lifeless. I told myself that I needed to hear the truth directly from him. Not from screenshots, not from someone else's version of events. I needed to look into his eyes and ask the question that was burning through me like fire. That evening, I went to his apartment. The moment he opened the door, I saw guilt before he even spoke. His smile was practiced, shallow. His eyes could not meet mine for more than a second. He said, "Hey, what is wrong? You look tired." I walked past him without answering. The air inside the apartment felt different, heavy, suffocating. There were faint traces of a woman's perfume that was not mine. It was subtle, but it was there. My chest tightened. I turned toward him and asked quietly, "Who is Emily?" His body froze for a moment, and then he let out a small, nervous laugh. "Emma, I already told you. She is just a friend. You are overthinking again." This time, I did not argue. I simply took out my phone, opened the messages, and handed it to him. For several seconds, he stared at the screen without saying a word. The color drained from his face. Then he exhaled and said, "Emma, please, it was nothing serious. I made a mistake." A mistake. That word echoed inside my head until it became unbearable. I asked him, "Was it a mistake when you texted her while I was asleep next to you?" Was it a mistake when you spent our anniversary with her? Or when you promised her the same things you promised me? He rubbed his forehead, trying to gather himself. I was weak, he said. It was a moment of weakness. You have to understand. I was under pressure. I was not thinking clearly. His excuses were rehearsed, mechanical. I stood there watching a man I once adored become a stranger right before my eyes. Every sentence he spoke was a lie wrapped in half-truths. He called betrayal a moment of weakness, as if cheating was an accidental fall, not a deliberate act repeated over months. I said, "Do you even hear yourself? Do you understand what you have done?" He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. The look in his eyes was not remorse. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. He said softly, "Emma, please, we can fix this." "You mean everything to me?" For a second, I wanted to believe him. My heart still carried the memory of who I thought he was, the man who made me feel seen. But that man never existed. He was a story I built around his lies. I asked him one last question. How long? He hesitated. A few months. The truth hit me harder than I expected. I turned away so he would not see the tears forming in my eyes. I could not let him see me break. Not again. I walked toward the door, but he followed me. "Emma, please do not walk away like this. I swear I love you." I stopped and looked at him for the final time. "You do not love me, Jack. You love the way I made you feel, safe, adored, forgiven. You love the version of yourself that you saw in my eyes. But you never loved me." He tried to speak, but I walked out before he could say another word. The hallway outside felt colder than I remembered. My legs felt weak, but I kept walking until I reached my car. When I sat inside, I could finally breathe again. The silence was unbearable. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and began to cry. Not the soft, quiet tears of heartbreak, but deep, painful sobs that came from somewhere beyond words. I cried for the version of me that believed him. I cried for the nights I spent waiting for his calls, for the trust I gave so freely, for the love I had to bury alive. For days after that confrontation, I barely functioned. My apartment felt haunted, filled with echoes of him. His toothbrush still sat by the sink. His jacket still hung on the back of my chair. Every object became a reminder of what I had lost, and what I had never truly had. I deleted his number, blocked his social media, but somehow he kept finding ways to reach me. Voicemails, emails, even a letter left at my door. The same words repeated over and over again. "I am sorry. Please forgive me." But how do you forgive someone who is only sorry because they were caught? I began to see everything clearly. The truth was not that he had made a mistake. It was that he had made a choice, again and again, without hesitation, without guilt, until his lies collapsed under their own weight. One night, I received another message from Emily. She said, "I am sorry you had to find out this way." He told me he was single. I had no idea. I believed her. Not because I wanted to, but because her pain sounded genuine. She was a victim of his deceit too, just in a different way. He had played both of us, weaving the same words of love between two lives. It was then that I realized the depth of his manipulation. He had not only betrayed me, he had built a web so wide that it trapped anyone who dared to trust him. I started therapy a few weeks later. My therapist asked me, "What do you want to feel right now?" I said, "Peace." She nodded and told me, "Then stop chasing closure from the person who broke you. Closure is something you give yourself." Those words stayed with me. I began deleting his messages one by one, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. I stopped trying to understand why he did what he did. There was no logic in betrayal. It is not about love or lust. It is about power, control, and ego. Months later, I found out something that still chills me. Just a few days after meeting my family, while we were still talking about engagement, he had been trying to see Emily again. The same week he promised me a future, he was arranging to relive his lies. That was when everything became painfully clear. Jack was never confused. He was never weak. He was calculated, deliberate, and cold. Every word he said about loyalty was a cover, every promise a distraction. I used to think the worst part of heartbreak was losing someone you love. But I learned that the real pain comes from realizing that the person you loved never existed in the first place. I do not know if I will ever understand how someone can lie so easily, or how they can sleep peacefully after destroying someone's faith. But I know this, truth, no matter how painful, is still better than living inside a lie. That night, I stood by my window, looking out at the city lights, and I whispered to myself, "You survived." And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. For a long time after I walked away from Jack, I lived in silence. My world became smaller, quieter, safer. I deleted every trace of him, his photos, his messages, his number, his voice. I blocked him everywhere, not out of anger, but because I needed distance to breathe. I believed that if I could erase him from my world, I might finally erase the pain that came with him. But the past has a way of finding you, even when you shut every door. It started with a letter, a real physical letter, the kind that people rarely send anymore. I found it one morning in my mailbox, folded neatly inside a plain white envelope. There was no return address, but I recognized his handwriting instantly. It was precise, deliberate, almost too perfect. For several minutes I stood there at the doorway, just staring at the envelope. My first instinct was to throw it away. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It whispers softly, convincing you to open wounds you swore you had already closed. I tore it open. The letter began with the words, "Emma, I know you hate me and you have every reason to. But please read this before you decide what I deserve." His handwriting was steady, confident. He wrote about regret, about the nights he could not sleep, about missing me every second of the day. He said he was drowning in guilt, that losing me had shown him the depth of his mistakes. He said I was his entire world, his home, his only peace. I kept reading, even though every word made my chest tighten. He said he cheated because he was dealing with too much pain, that he was under pressure, that he lost discipline and acted without thinking. He said, "I did not betray you because I did not love you. Emma, I betrayed you because I did not know how to love correctly." I folded the letter and placed it on the table. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I felt sadness, anger, or nothing at all. His words sounded poetic, maybe even sincere, but I had heard enough of his justifications to know that remorse and manipulation often wear the same face. Over the next 2 weeks, more letters came, each one carefully written, sealed, and delivered by hand. He must have driven across town to leave them in my mailbox, because the postmark was always blank. Every letter carried the same message: apologies, promises, explanations. In one letter he wrote, "I have started therapy. I am trying to understand why I hurt the person I loved the most. Please, Emma, do not give up on me. People can change." In another, "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I wake up every morning hoping to see your name again." At first, I refused to reply. I did not want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that his words had reached me. But as the letters kept arriving, something inside me began to unravel. I felt confusion more than anything. If he truly loved me, then why did he betray me? Why did he risk everything we built for meaningless moments with someone else? How could love and deceit live in the same heart? I asked myself that question every night. There were times I almost convinced myself that maybe he was telling the truth, that maybe pain and stress could make people do terrible things. But then I remembered the calmness with which he lied to me, the steady tone, the soft smile, the practiced explanations. That was not confusion. That was choice. Love does not demand perfection, but it does demand honesty. And Jack had turned honesty into a weapon, something he used only when cornered. One evening, I sat by the window reading his 5th letter. He had written about how he had started journaling, meditating, praying for forgiveness. He said he had changed. But there was something unsettling between the lines. Every sentence was about how he felt, his pain, his regret, his healing. There was not a single word about what I went through, about the destruction he caused in my world. That was when I understood something vital. He did not miss me. He missed the version of himself that existed when I was still in his life, the one who felt adored, forgiven, and whole. What he called love was simply dependence. It is easy to call someone your whole world when they carry all the parts of you that you refuse to face yourself. The following morning, I tore up every letter. I watched the pieces fall into the trash like ashes, but as I did, my hands trembled, not out of sadness, but out of the weight of finality. This time, there would be no return, no forgiveness, no space for his redemption arc. I realized that healing is not about waiting for the other person to change. It is about accepting that even if they do, you do not owe them a second chance. Still, the questions haunted me. How can someone claim to love and yet deceive so consciously? Is it possible for love and betrayal to coexist in the same person? Or was it never love to begin with? My therapist once told me, some people mistake attachment for love. They cling to the comfort of being wanted, not the responsibility of being truthful. That sentence stayed in my mind like a soft echo. Maybe Jack had loved the way an addict loves the thing that destroys him, completely, desperately, without discipline. But love without accountability is not love. It is selfishness wrapped in poetry. A few days later, I found another envelope at my door. This time, I did not open it. I left it on the table, untouched, until evening. When I finally looked at it again, I took it outside and burned it. I watched the fire swallow his words, the smoke rising into the night sky, carrying everything I once believed in. I whispered to myself, you cannot rebuild peace with the person who destroyed it. For the first time, those words did not sound bitter. They sounded freeing. That night, I went for a walk. The city was quiet, the air cool. I realized that I was no longer thinking about him every hour. The pain had not disappeared, but it had softened. I was beginning to reclaim my thoughts, my mornings, my laughter. Healing is not sudden. It is a slow reclamation of everything that was taken from you. It is the moment you stop needing answers and start building peace in their absence. When I returned home, I saw the empty space on the table where the letters had once been. It looked like closure, not the kind he asked for, but the kind I gave myself. I sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, and watched the city lights shimmer like tiny fragments of hope. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who trusted blindly, who forgave too easily. I did not hate her anymore. She was not weak. She was simply someone who loved deeply and expected the same in return. Jack's final letter, the one I never opened, was the last attempt of a man still running from his reflection. But I was no longer part of his story. I had my own. And for the first time in a long time, the silence in my apartment did not feel empty. It felt peaceful. The night I burned his last letter, I believed I had finally closed the chapter of Jack's existence in my life. I thought I had seen every layer of his deception, every shade of his hypocrisy. I thought nothing about him could shock me anymore. I was wrong. A few days later, I received a message from one of our mutual friends, Hannah. She sounded hesitant, almost guilty. She said she needed to tell me something she had not known how to share before. My stomach tightened immediately. The tone in her voice reminded me of the moments right before a storm. We met at a cafe near my apartment. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her hands as if she was about to confess a crime. I tried to reassure her, but inside my pulse was hammering. I already sensed it had something to do with Jack. It always did. Finally, she said, "Emma, I do not know how to say this, but you need to hear it from someone who cares about you. 2 days before he started sending you those apology letters, he was with Emily again." For a second, her words did not make sense. My mind refused to process them. It was as if she had spoken in a language I did not understand. I asked quietly, "What do you mean with her?" Hannah hesitated, her eyes filled with pity. "They were together, Emma, intimately, and it was unprotected. Emily told a friend, and the news reached me yesterday. I thought you deserved to know." The air around me vanished. I could not breathe. My heart pounded so hard that I could hear it echoing in my ears. I felt heat rush to my face, followed by a cold that went straight to my bones. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say she had misunderstood. But she did not. It was true. The man who had written pages of apologies, the man who called me his entire world, the man who begged for forgiveness, had slept with the same woman he cheated with, just 2 days before sending his letters of repentance. For a long moment I said nothing. My hands were trembling so badly that I had to grip the edge of the table to stop them from shaking. Hannah kept saying, "I am sorry, Emma," but her voice felt far away, muffled like it was coming from underwater. When I finally spoke, my voice did not sound like mine. It was hollow, detached. So he was asking for forgiveness while still living the same lie. She nodded softly, her eyes full of sorrow. After she left, I sat there for another hour, staring at the empty coffee cup in front of me. I could not feel anger at first, just shock. My brain could not keep up with the reality that the person I had loved so deeply, the person who swore that he was broken with guilt, was capable of that level of deceit. When I returned home, I walked straight to the mirror and looked at myself. I saw exhaustion, confusion, disgust. I whispered, "Why?" But the reflection had no answers. How can someone claim to love you while destroying you at the same time? He had said he was remorseful, that he was working on himself, that he had learned from his mistakes. But if regret was real, how could he share a bed with the same person he betrayed me with, knowing how much pain it had already caused? The truth struck me like a revelation. Jack's apologies had never been about me. They were about him. They were about soothing his own guilt, protecting his self-image, rebuilding the illusion that he was still a good man who made a bad mistake. He was not seeking forgiveness. He was seeking redemption without accountability. And once again, I had almost believed him. That realization made my skin crawl. My heartbreak began to turn into something darker. Rage. A clean, burning anger that came not from hate, but from the brutal clarity of truth. He had played me even in his apology. His remorse had been nothing more than another performance. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with the lights off, trying to make sense of the chaos in my chest. The words kept circling in my mind, unprotected sex. It was not just betrayal. It was recklessness, cruelty, a complete disregard for my safety, my dignity, and my peace. I remembered every time he had looked me in the eye and promised honesty. Every time he said, "You are the only one I want." Every time he called me his safe place. All of it was contaminated now, poisoned by the truth that he had been living 2 lives with no remorse. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My silence was louder than any cry could ever be. In the following days, I spiraled between disbelief and fury. My therapist told me, "Emma, you are trying to apply logic to something that is fundamentally illogical. He was not living in truth, so you will never make sense of his actions." She was right. Jack was not confused. He was not lost. He was in control of every choice he made. His so-called moments of weakness were not accidents. They were patterns. Patterns built on entitlement and lies. I began to see him for what he truly was. A man addicted to deceit. He needed to be desired by everyone because he did not know how to exist without external validation. Love to him was not a bond. It was a mirror reflecting his ego. That understanding did not ease the pain, but it gave the pain a name. One evening, Emily messaged me. I hesitated before opening it. Her words were brief but heavy. I did not know he was still contacting you. I thought he had moved on. I am so sorry, Emma. I feel sick about everything. I could feel her shame through the screen, and surprisingly, I did not hate her. She was another casualty of his lies, another person caught in the orbit of his deception. For the first time, I realized my anger was not toward her. It was toward him, the man who kept destroying everything good and calling it love. That night, I walked outside, needing air, needing distance from the suffocating weight of what I had learned. The city lights blurred through my tears. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. If he truly loved me, then why? There was no answer. There never would be. Because love does not coexist with deliberate betrayal. Because the kind of man who can say, I love you in the same breath he lies, is not a man who loves. He is a man who consumes. I realized something crucial that night. Closure does not come when they apologize. It comes when you stop needing to understand their reasons. I stood under the streetlight, feeling the cold wind on my skin, and whispered to myself, "You deserved better." It was the first time I truly believed it. When I returned home, I deleted Emily's message, blocked Jack's email, and removed every remaining trace of him from my life. It felt final this time, like turning the last page of a book that had already taken too much from me. The next morning I woke up lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. The truth had hurt me more than I thought possible, but it had also freed me. Because now I no longer saw Jack as the man who broke my heart. I saw him as the man who taught me what real love should never look like. And as painful as that lesson was, it was mine to keep. When the truth finally sank in, I felt like I was standing in the ruins of everything I once believed in. There was no more denial left to hide behind. No, maybe he did not mean it. No, perhaps he is changing. Only the raw, unbearable reality that the man I once trusted with my entire being had never truly respected the meaning of love, honesty, or safety. The moment Hannah told me about his last act of betrayal, something inside me broke completely, but not in a tragic way. It was the kind of breaking that clears out everything rotten, the kind that leaves room for strength to grow. I woke up the next morning with an unusual calm. My hands were steady, my breath even. The storm inside had finally settled, leaving only clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I booked an appointment for an STD test. Sitting in the sterile clinic, surrounded by white walls and the faint scent of disinfectant, I felt a wave of emotions that I cannot even describe. Shame, fear, disgust, sadness, all tangled together. But underneath it all, there was determination. I was doing this for me. For the woman who had trusted too deeply and paid the price for someone else's recklessness. When the nurse called my name, I stood up tall. My voice did not tremble. My mind did not wander back to him. I was not there because of Jack's choices. I was there because I finally valued myself enough to protect my future, even if he had not. While I waited for the results, Jack kept calling. Dozens of missed calls, endless messages. His words blurred together. Please forgive me, Emma. I made a mistake. I will do anything to prove my love. I stared at the phone, reading every word like it was a lie carved into the screen. There was a time when those same words could have made my heart ache with hope. But now they only sounded hollow. His apologies had lost their meaning, like a song that had been played too many times. He wanted absolution, but forgiveness is not a gift you beg for. It is something you earn through change. And he had not changed. When I finally agreed to meet him one last time, it was not because I wanted closure from him. It was because I wanted to speak from a place of truth, my truth. We met at the same park where we used to walk our dog, back when everything still felt pure. The autumn air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under my shoes as I approached him. He looked smaller somehow, drained, desperate. His eyes searched mine for a trace of softness, but there was none left to find. He began immediately. "Emma, I know I have hurt you, but I swear I am a different man now. I cannot live without you. Please, just give me one more chance." His voice trembled. His eyes watered. But I saw through the performance this time. I stood there quietly for a long moment, letting him speak until he ran out of excuses. Then I said calmly, "Jack, you say you are sorry, but 2 days before those words you were in another woman's bed. Tell me, how does that align with remorse?" He froze, his face pale. I watched his lips part as he searched for something to say, but there was nothing. Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. For the first time, he could not lie his way out. I continued, "You did not come to apologize. You came to ease your guilt. You want me to say I forgive you so you can sleep better at night, but I will not carry that burden for you anymore." His shoulders slumped. His eyes lowered. There was no defense left. No manipulation, no justification. Just a man stripped of his illusions. "I hope," I said softly, "that one day you understand what it means to truly love someone, not for how they make you feel, but for how you treat them when they trust you. You did not lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because you made the same one again and called it love." And with that, I turned away. I did not look back. Not once. As I walked away, I felt tears stinging my eyes, but they were not the same tears I had shed before. These were not tears of heartbreak. They were tears of liberation. For the first time in months, my steps felt light. The chains of confusion and guilt that had bound me were gone. A week later, my test results came back negative. I cried again that day, but this time from relief and gratitude. I promised myself I would never again ignore the red flags that scream louder than love. I started therapy again, picked up my old sketchbook, began reading before bed instead of scrolling through his messages. Slowly, the pieces of myself that I had lost began to return. Healing was not instant. It never is. There were still nights when I woke up angry, when the memories tried to pull me back into the darkness. But every time they did, I reminded myself of that moment in the park, the silence after I spoke the truth. That was the sound of my freedom. Now, when I think of Jack, I do not feel hatred. I feel distance. He is just another lesson in the long story of my life, a painful one, but necessary. Because he taught me that love without respect is poison, and forgiveness without accountability is surrender. People often say time heals all wounds, but I have learned that it is not time. It is choice. The choice to walk away, the choice to protect your peace, the choice to never again mistake manipulation for affection. If you have ever been betrayed, if you have ever loved someone who lied to you while looking you in the eyes, I want you to remember this. You are not broken. You were simply loyal to the wrong person. That is not weakness. That is proof that your heart was real. And one day, someone will value that honesty. They will meet you where you are, not as a convenience, not as an option, but as a choice. Until then, protect your peace like it is sacred, because it is. As for Jack, he never got the ending he wanted. There were no more tears, no more drama, no emotional reconciliation. Only silence. The silence of a woman who finally realized her worth. When he sent his last message, Do you still hate me? I replied only once. I wrote, no, I do not hate you. I just finally see you for who you are. And that is enough. Then I blocked him forever. The story ends there. Not with forgiveness, not with reconciliation, but with truth. Because sometimes the most powerful closure is not saying, I forgive you, but saying, I am done. And that is where my story ends. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. Not as the woman he broke, but as the woman who rose. I am Emma, and I did not forgive him. I freed myself instead. Do not confuse apologies with change. Some people say I am sorry to keep you in their cycle, not because they are truly remorseful. Protect your peace. Protect your health. And never let guilt convince you to return to someone who has shown you they will hurt you again. If this story resonated with you, remember, you are stronger than your pain. Healing is not the end of love. It is the beginning of self-respect. Subscribe to Hopeful Endings for more true human tales, stories that cut deep, heal deeper, and remind you that even after heartbreak, there is always hope.